We're here to talk about the raising of moths and butterflies, but particularly today we're going to focus on the giant wild silk moths, and they've got a real following. You know, there's a whole books about the wild silk moths of North America. There's people around the world who get obsessed with these things and collect them. They're all in the family Saturniidae, like Saturn, the planet, named after the god Saturn, which was a giant. And these are giant moths, big as your hand, and all kinds of different colors and shapes. They include some of the most famous, you know, even people who think bugs are disgusting will say, oh my gosh, the Luna moth, what a spectacular insect, you know. They're almost like honorary birds, you know. So they get folks excited about bugs who otherwise think bugs are yucky. So they're useful in that way. They're kind of like a bridge between the ordinary city dweller and the world of insects, and they're really easy to raise. So let's talk about raising them. And there's a couple of ways to start. Usually we start by getting eggs, and there's a number of places you can order eggs from. And but you found eggs on plants, right?
Yes.
When you look for monarchs.
Yes.
Yeah, monarchs are relatively easy because they only feed on one thing, and it's a low plant, the milkweed. But these moths are laying their eggs up in trees, so it's a lot harder to find the eggs. So usually you send away, and we could attach some text to your little video and give people ideas about where to send away for eggs. I just got a letter from this guy in Canada who raises moths and sells eggs. And he's announcing that they have cocoons of Luna, they have eggs for sale of a bunch of different species. So they're ready to sell. But once you have them going, you can actually get your own eggs. So let's talk about how that works. And we'll come back to the eggs in the rest of the life cycle in a minute. Because right now, at this time of year, late May, early June, the moths are coming out of their cocoons. And in particular, what I have here are Cecropia cocoons. That's the Cecropia moth. I'll show you what an adult looks like in a minute. But these are the cocoons of Cecropia moths. They're a tough, silken creation, and they're kind of cool. Let's open one up. When I do this with kids, they say, "You're going to kill it." And I always say, "No, look. Let's say your friend is visiting and you have a sleepover and your friend is in a sleeping bag. If you unzip your sleeping bag, do you hurt your friend? Well, no. Well, that's what I'm doing here. I'm just unzipping a sleeping bag, and I'm not going to hurt what's inside it because it's just like the zipper. We're just going to use these little tiny scissors and open up the cocoon like this. And kids are always like this because the first thing you find is, you know.
Those have been living in my garage for the
That's
last
right.
6
Yep.
months.
These were raised all the way to the cocoon stage by Margaret.
Yeah. And we had some work.
And what you find is another cocoon.
Yeah.
So there's 2 cocoons, a double layered. And I always ask kids, so which layer did they make first? Of course, they have to make the outer layer first. And then let's see. I'm just a little worried that right at this time of year, the moth will be like waiting to come out. And let's just have a look. Oh, I have to get a start on this layer. And there have been efforts over the years of getting some of these North American silk moths to produce silk and make, a silk industry. But so far it hasn't been successful. I think the big difference is these moths, when they're spinning their cocoons, they don't make they don't use a single strand. The strands are in pieces as they're spinning. Whereas the famous the silk moth of commerce starts its cocoon and uses one continuous strand until its cocoon is finished. So that allows you to take the cocoon, find an end, and start pulling. And you get like a mile-long thread of silk that way. And that's how you can weave it into all kinds of things like scarves and stuff like that. Yeah, it's good. Oh boy, it's alive. It's alive!
The kids love this at the farmer's market, and they'll be real gentle with them. They name them, they give them all kinds of cool stuff, and they play with them, but they're very, very careful, and, it is fun. Occasionally one will fly away.
When you open the cocoon?
No, a little later.
Yeah. All right. Here it comes. Oh, this is the last shed skin of the caterpillar. And then inside here is the pupa. And if we tickle it, it wiggles. Tickle, 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 tickle. Poor thing, it probably thinks I'm a mouse about to eat it.
Are you?
No! It has to go in the right way, because only one end of this little sleeping bag has an exit. So it goes back in that way, and then it goes back in here. Where's the one? Oh yeah. Like that.
Wow.
And it'll come out in a few days, most likely. It's the time. And so, if you have cocoons, what I do is I build a box like this with screen. Mm-hmm. And the screen really helps because I can set it someplace where I can keep an eye on it, and I can just glance at it and see if a big moth is hanging on the screen. As I'm leaving the house, I just glance over at my cocoon box.
Yes.
And you can see if something has come out. So you don't have to open a box or anything. And so I put screen on both sides so the light comes through. If there's a big moth the size of your hand blocking, you'll notice. And the screen is also really important because when the moth comes out, its wings are all rumpled and wet. And it has to crawl up. It has to have a high enough perch that its wings can hang down below it like wet towels, and it gradually fills them with fluid, and then they dry. It takes hours. But if they're anywhere near the ground or crowded in any way, their wings will dry bent. It's called a wing cripple, and they'll never fly. Their wings will dry completely bent. Once they're dry, you can't straighten them. So they have to be able to climb up. But when they're allowed to extend their wings properly, they get this beautiful big shape like that. So when you get a moth out, the next question is it a male or a female? And the males, so just to back up here a second, these are very short-lived insects. They only live about a week. And the males emerge from the cocoon, and they have this mission of seeking through the forest the molecules of the perfume of the female, the pheromones they're called. And so they have broad antennae. Their antennae are quite bushy. And also they're really designed for flight, so their abdomens are rather streamlined and thin. And they seek a female, and if they hit a pheromone plume, you know, the trail of the perfume, they'll turn upwind and seek that female. The females are born with 350 to 400 eggs, all ready to go. And the eggs are not like microscopic. They're you know, they've got some size to them, and so the abdomen of the female is filled with eggs. So the male's abdomen is thinner, but the plumy antennae are broader. And the female's abdomen is chunkier, and the antennae are still like feathers. See, that looks like a feather? But the female's antenna is a little narrower. Let's see, I think this number 4, yeah, the number 4 here is a female, and maybe you can see the antennae are quite narrow. Got that? I'm going to pass that around. Number 4 here, in the upper right hand corner. The antennae are narrower. So if you get a female out in your cocoon box, then you really have a great opportunity. You build a cage, and it's more romantic if you call it in Spanish, casita de amor.
Oh.
So this is one of my casita de amor, and you just place the female in there, and then you wait for night and you go down to the river or some other conservation area. I really think the Charles River is best because it's a corridor, and you'll have moths moving up and down in that corridor. And anyway, that's where I've always tried it. Like the Blue Heron Bridge, I've hung them in the forest, and you got to put them out of sight of people, or else they'll say, "Oh, poor moth, let's let her go," you know. And of course she'll get eaten by a bird within about minutes. But anyway, and so what happens is at like 2 in the morning, and I always go home and I go to bed, you know, but I come back in the morning early before the birds have found them, and the moth, the male, will be on the outside, and they can reach the female through the screen, abdomen to abdomen. And what's really strange at that point is you can carry them around the rest of the day and show people, and the male never flies. He never flies. And there's 2 theories about why the male sticks on, because it turns out, you know, if you go and check on them first thing in the morning and you're like lifting the cage and it falls and the male does get knocked off, the female is fully fertile. The male doesn't have to, like, you know, mate for a day. It's probably more like 15 minutes and it's like, you know, mated. The female is fertilized. But why would the male hang out? And so there's the selfish male hypothesis and there's the gallant male hypothesis. Let's start with the selfish. The selfish one is, well, if he flies away right away, maybe another male will mate too. And then the progeny will be a mixture of fathers, and the first male doesn't want to have anyone else sharing his eggs, right? That's the selfish male hypothesis, so it's called mate guarding. And then the gallant male hypothesis is that, imagine this in nature. The female's up in a tree, not in a cage, in nature, of course. And the male and the female are mating, and these moths live very short amount of time, only about a week. So the female has to find like 100 trees in her short life, because she lays about 4 eggs per tree. She can lay 100 eggs the very first night. Not the night of the mating, the following night. If it isn't pouring rain, she'll fly and lay about 100 eggs the very first night. Now, she might get eaten by a bird soon after that, or a bat. But if the male can just keep her alive one day until nightfall, the next night, then he has a chance to have daughters and sons of his own. And so the theory goes like this. If a bird does find the pair, they're not a whole lot more conspicuous than the female all by herself. And so what can happen is the bird attacks, and half the time he's going to take the male, and the female can fly away. And so it's like the ultimate sacrifice to protect his sons and daughters. It's very sweet. And these two theories are not mutually exclusive. You know, it might be some of each. The other thing is that if the bird pecks, the male can fly kind of erratically. The female, so heavy, she might just drop into the leaves, you know, and the bird chases the male. You get the idea. It's the gallant male hypothesis. Okay, the female flies and lays eggs. Now you get all these eggs. In your caged female, what you do is you wait for the male to finally take off. He takes off the next night. And now the female is fully mated and ready to lay eggs. I don't think we have a caterpillar bag. I forgot to bring caterpillar bag. Do you have any? Maybe. You know, the plastic bags we use?
Maybe.
Okay, never mind.
Want me to go look?
Well, if you want to, yeah. I mean, anyway, we place the female in a plastic bag with a clothespin in the shade. If you put her any of this step in the sun, it gets too hot. And the female then proceeds to lay eggs on the inside of the bag for several days. What I usually want to do is I let her lay 100 eggs. I can't take care of more than 100 caterpillars. And then I'll let her go. And she'll lay 300 eggs out in nature if she survives. But now we have 100 eggs in a bag. I put them all in a little, you know, Tupperware where we can watch them, like a clear, you know, the hummus cups or something like that, you know. And about 8 days later, these tiny little black bears come out. They're like little black fuzzy bears. And they are hungry. And this tree is the best food. This is the black cherry. And they just grow like crazy on black cherry. And so when they're just really tiny, you can have them all feeding in one bag because they're so tiny. And so you take sprigs, you know, sprigs of the cherry tree. Don't take the leaves off. Take whole sprigs, place them in the bag, and the caterpillars will crawl up onto the leaves and feed. And the bottom of the bag gets covered in tiny black poops. And so every 3 days you should, you know, clean it out. But within maybe a week, you've got to start dividing because they get big fast. And so they should go into 2 bags. And now they shed their skin at about day 7 or 6 or 7, and they become what's called the second instar. So what comes out of the egg is the first instar, little black things. The second instar, they start to have color, mix of gray and yellow and stuff. And then the third instar begins to have like a little green color and tubercles. And if you hand me that book, we can show them the final instar.
I'll go see if I can find the bag. You're talking about the white gauzy ones?
The final instar, the biggest caterpillars, are. I'm just talking about the caterpillar bag we raise the cocoons and stuff in. Yeah. So all these different caterpillars. Here we go. So this is the 5th instar of the Cecropia, right here by my finger. That's the final instar. And they're like little hot dogs in size. Not quite as long as an actual typical hot dog, but about as big around as a hot dog. And they have, you've seen them at the farmer's market, right? Have you ever seen them at the farmer's market? Okay. Yike! big green caterpillars with red, blue, and yellow spikes. And
Yeah, there he is. That's what it looks like. It is as big as your finger. Yeah, it's like that big when it's really grown.
and you can't really see them, but they have blue toes. You can't really see that, but these are like bright orange red. You see them at the front of
We'll
the
tell all the kids, look, they have little sneakers on their feet. Little blue sneakers. And I'm like, oh wow. Is this the bag you're looking for?
No, I was actually looking for the plastic bag we just raised moths in, you know, the kind that, like, you remember when I came and picked up the cocoons?
Yeah.
I took away all your bags. I'm afraid I must have taken away all your bags.
That's okay. But these are hung up. This is hung up.
Yeah, you got to bring those over because we'll look at that. We'll talk about that next. Thank you. Very good idea.
Oh, sure. That one's,
Yeah, that's perfect. Whoops.
don't get all excited here. This one
Okay.
has seen better days.
And so
Ooh, gross.
when the caterpillars get to be like 4th instar, they're green with these spikes and tubercles. And by then you really ought to stop trying to raise them in bags. It just becomes too dangerous. If there's too many in a bag, you can get mold or other diseases really easily. So what we do is we choose a branch and the cherry tree, and we make these nets. And so it's a game of chasing down netting and sewing it into tubes. And once you get a tube, you can slip it over a branch and then just close it up with some string like this. So you'd put the you put the branch right inside there. There you go. There's the entrance. So you just slip this over a big leafy branch.
Yep. Right up there.
Right up there, and you cover the whole leafy branch with this fine netting. And then you take your caterpillars that are, and you never try to take the caterpillar off the stick. You know, you might have a caterpillar on a stick, and you want to change it to a new bag or put it in the net. Never try to rip them off. You'll break their little toes. You'll damage them. They do not let go. Their defense is to hold all the tighter. And so what you do is you take the whole twig with the caterpillars and you set them inside the net, and you can use a clothespin, you know, to clip them into the branch. And then you just close it up, tie it really nice and tight, and they're safe. Unless the dang squirrels come by, right? You've had squirrels come up over and break in.
1 year. Maybe
Just
one of
one
the
year.
First years, yeah.
I remember that you had squirrels break in. But and the netting fills with poop, and they're like the size of rabbit pellets, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yes, they are.
Because it's like just a big, long digestive tract, you know, big around as a hot dog, and then eventually, and you've had to change branches, right? So during the course of a summer, you might have to change to a whole new branch.
Yeah. They gobble up all the leaves on one branch.
And they'll strip it. They'll just strip it. It's crazy. Try not to raise too many. You know, you don't really need like 50 moths, right? But then Margaret will come out here, take a few to the farmer's market, and off you go. You've got your stock,
Yep.
you know, your corral, and you can take some for show and tell. So then what happens is eventually they're fully grown and they spin cocoons attached to the branches. And you really should wait like 10 days after a cocoon is formed. At least 10 days. Because the moth is inside still spinning its second cocoon, and then must be a lot of work. They eventually will synthesize the pupal skin and shed their caterpillar skin and become a pupa. And then it all kinds of hardens up, and then it's safe to take them and pull them off the branches. And Margaret, you just put them in the garage in a bag for the whole winter. In our part of the country, this moth only has one generation. It only has one generation a year. in other parts of the country, like in, you know, obviously in the south, where they have a longer growing season, the Cecropia might have 2 generations. There's another moth around here called the Promethea. It's a little smaller, and it has 2 generations, even here. Yeah, that one is, that's in this book too, but it's a little bit smaller and not so sort of spectacular in color. You have the Promethea?
I'm looking.
All right. And the moths vary a little bit in how easy they are to raise because, yeah, here's the Promethea.
Oh, okay.
I got fooled. They vary a little bit in how easy they are to raise because, for example, yeah, Calisomia Promethea. See, they're not quite as spectacular, but they're pretty neat. And these are harder. These are harder because they have only a couple of host plants they really like. I think they actually do like cherry, though.
Yeah.
I think we've raised them on black cherry.
Yeah, we tried, I think, at least once.
But they really like sassafras and spicebush, and so and those are a little bit harder to find. Pretty sure they eat black cherry, but I remember going. Remember we used to go over to the what's it called, the estate,
Oh, yeah.
and get sassafras.
Yeah.
Had
Don't
a little.
tell anybody.
You have a little local supply of it here,
Oh,
which is handy.
yeah.
And that's the cycle.
Yeah.
So that's really the basics, you know. And you can see the equipment is very easy to make at home. It's just I just made this one up because I have a Brandeis student who contacted me, and it turns out she just ordered a whole bunch of cocoons.
Oh, wow.
And she just texted me today. She says, Professor Olson, I have a Cecropia and a Luna out. What do I do? So we're talking about what to do next. So I'm going to be taking her this, this is the Emergence Cage, but she sent me a picture of what she has. She bought a commercial butterfly Emergence. I think you have one of these screens.
Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's show them that. I don't know how to open it up. You have to show them how to open it up. So this is like, there you go.
Wait a minute, it's got more to it. I'm sorry, I'm cage challenged.
That's all right. That's all right. Here comes the cage guy.
Ta-da!
Wow.
Ta-da!
Oh my gosh. Look at that. It's really nice.
Very easy.
And it has
Yeah.
a bath mat on the floor.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The classic poop catching. I see. It's like a little door like that, right?
Yeah.
That's very cool. No,
And
what a great thing.
Yeah.
That's probably like $10 online or something, you know.
Yes.
And what's that?
He-
10 to 12.
10 to 12.
so he gave me that as a present last year, 2 years
For
ago.
babysitting our monarchs.
Oh, very
yeah,
good.
for babysitting the monarchs.
Oh, yeah. The stuff you get, you know, this is great. So you need this Emergence Cage, and in the spring you should put your cocoons, maybe you've had them in a bag in the shed. Don't bring the cocoons inside, ever. If you bring the cocoons inside, they're going to think it's spring,
Whoops.
and they'll come out in February, and there's nowhere for them to fly in February.
They fly around your kitchen.
So you keep the cocoons in the cold, in a shed or in the garage, and then they know what season it is, and they'll come out at the appropriate time. The females come out when there's, you know, leaves to lay eggs on, and the males come out when there's females to find, and so that's it. You know, you raise them up on these nets and bags. When you get the cocoons, they stay over winter in the garage. In the spring, they go into the Emergence Cage, so they have screen to climb up on, like this, or like Ted's magnificent
Yeah.
casona. And then if you get a female, you can set her in the Casita de Amor and set her by the river in like Blue Heron Bridge. Now I live in Waltham, right by the Mount Feek Cemetery, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm across the river there, and I have had good luck bringing in a male there. Yeah. They called in a male at that location too. Then you get if you're lucky, you get a male to come into the female, and The great thing, you know, if you have 20 cocoons,
Mhm.
it's a good chance you're going to get a male and a female at some point. And if they come out the same day and you don't notice, you'll find them mating that night. So they don't have any qualms about mating sister-brother, you know. But it's not ideal for genetics. And so the first generation, it's not a big problem and you'll get happy caterpillars. But if you do that like continually, then things become pretty inbred and you might start to see dwarfism or deformities or something. So the great thing about setting the female out, for one thing, you get the satisfaction of actually seeing a wild male moth, you know, that comes into your female. But you also are constantly outcrossing, so you get a fresh set of genes and not brother-sister. And keep the stock real healthy that way. So we've been running several years now without having to get anyone else to give us eggs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I have a friend in West Bridgewater who raises these moths, and if I ever have bad luck and my own stock peters out, he usually is a good supplier. And
Yeah, it's a caterpillar farm.
have you been to Don's place?
Yeah,
We went there.
You invited Don and me down there several years ago, and it is just like as big as this whole block.
He's great. He's a great guy. He's an engineer by trade, and he just has this obsession.
Mm-hmm.
He grew up near the Blue Hills. I think he loved nature because of that park.
Yeah. But
And,
it is really cool.
And he's a cool guy. He has 3 acres of meadow. So he raises monarchs and spicebush swallowtail and black swallowtail and the blue spotted purple, or red spotted purple. He raises that one. Of course, these moths, Luna, Promethea, Cecropia, Polyphemus. Yeah, so he's a great guy, and he's getting on in years. I don't know. You're going to have to become the next moth rearer to carry the generations forward.
I'm the caterpillar lady. You can become the moth lady. We'll hang out at the farm.
You guys can work together. We already have a monarch guy,
Oh yeah.
but we need the next generation to get obsessed with this. That's why I was so excited to get the call from the Brandeis student. You know, she's
Yeah.
graduated from Brandeis, and lives in Newton, and she's about to have a baby. So she's like, you know, well beyond college now, but she really is obsessed with these moths, and so this is the first year she's raised them.
Eric, I have a question. What is the future, or how you see the future of the caterpillars and butterflies with climate change?
Well, it depends on the species. You know, this one that we're talking about is found way deep in the south. As far as I know, there's even Florida populations of this moth. And so as the growing bands of seasons move north with climate change, what may happen is that we start to have more arrivals of the southern populations, but I don't think we're looking at extinctions because their geographic range is so broad and their climate tolerance is already from Florida into Canada. The same with black cherry. It also has a very wide range. So I think that it's probably not a species in great danger of extinction for that reason. I'm a little puzzled about why it is that we find less of them, though. Because when I was a kid, I was already obsessed, and I'd find their droppings on the sidewalk, you know, and go back with my dad later with a ladder and go up in the tree and bring down caterpillars. So I always do when I'm walking. I just can't help it. I look at the sidewalks, you know, and it's rare to see caterpillar poop nowadays. I used to find the cocoons in the winter. That's a really good thing to know. This cocoon is actually up in the tree in winter. It doesn't drop. They silk it to a branch.
Oh yeah. We found them up here once a year.
Yeah, and they silk them to a branch, and so you when you're walking in winter and all the leaves are off the tree, you can get a kind of search image, you know, for these things. And my friends who walk with me, you know, I'll like jump 10 feet off the trail and come back with a cocoon, and they go, "How'd you see that?" Well, you know, I did my PhD on these moths. If you didn't find the cocoons, you couldn't get your PhD. There was a lot of motivation. So you get a search image, and then you spot them. So, but I just find them less often now. I once was on a bird Christmas count with Chris Yellow. And we were on a Christmas count down on the Charles near the Watertown line. And right along the river I found a Cecropia cocoon at the Newton Watertown line, you know. So, but that was 15 years ago. And I keep looking, you know, they're just not that common.
Eric, when they become in butterflies, where they migrate? Because I remember when we talked with Ted, the monarchs go to Mexico.
Yeah.
Where do they go?
These don't live that long. They only live 10 days, dude.
Oh,
10 days. It's really a sad...
So they are locals.
They're local, and so what they're doing is they're mating. Their females are laying the eggs, and male and female die. It's like 10 days. And they don't even have a mouth. These none of these moths in this family feed as adults. So they have no proboscis, you know, the little coiled tongue like a butterfly or a sphinx moth has. So they never visit flowers. They never drink water. They're born out of the cocoon with this little, it's called the fat body. And you can kind of think of it like a gasoline tank, you know, and when it's empty, they're done.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a very short life. And I tell people about this because, look, if you count it up, okay, 8 days as an egg, maybe 40 days as a caterpillar, and they make their cocoon in, like, say, August. September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 9 months in the cocoon. And they come out and they live 10 days. And people look, and they look at me and say, "What's the point?" Because they think the adult is the, you know, that's like, you're trying to just get to the adult and then you can be a creature. And of course the answer is, the point is to make more moths and to mate and have eggs, you know, and lay eggs and keep the species going. And this is clearly, this particular life cycle is a success. It's a total success. They're triumphant, even though they live only a week.
They have enemies?
Oh, lots. Oh my gosh.
I mean,
yeah.
Which one is the worst?
Yeah. Well, probably the worst. And getting back to the reason they're rare, we could talk about a very unfortunate enemy. In the around early 1900s, this misguided idiot. I mean, he meant no harm, but he brought gypsy moths from Europe, and they escaped. I think it was in Medford.
Something like that.
And it's in a suburb of Boston. He had the moths in his yard, and they escaped. And we've had gypsy moth ever since. And at the time, the control on the gypsy moth is this fungus, and it hadn't arrived yet. And so the forests were just being defoliated. It was a terrible, I mean, I've seen photographs of this, you know, early summer, just bare. It looks like winter. And so they sent the entomologists back to Europe, and they tried to find everything that attacked gypsy moth caterpillars, and they brought them back.
Oh, wow.
No matter how specific or generalist they were. And they brought this little fly called the Compsognathus, and the terrible problem is it doesn't particularly like gypsy moth. Sometimes it lays its egg on gypsy moth caterpillars, but mostly it lays its eggs on the moths and butterflies of the United States. And it is a real killer. So if you set out caterpillars, of the Cecropia or the Promethea. If you set them out in nature at natural densities and come back every few days to check on them, until they make a cocoon, if they aren't eaten by birds, you get the cocoon, but then out of the cocoon comes these flies, the Compsognathura. And it's a real bad mortality agent. And so that's a case of biocontrol that got out of control. And it's really regrettable. So one of the reasons they're rare now is because we brought in this fly to control gypsy moth. And I guess we call it friendly fire, where your good guys get killed too. And so that's very regrettable. And once the fly is here, you'll never get rid of it. It doesn't have a fly that lays eggs on it. That would be no. So but in nature, there's a wasp that attacks the caterpillar in the night. They're a night flying wasp. And they land on the caterpillar, lay an egg and fly away. And the caterpillar is like, and it just keeps feeding. And it goes all the way and makes a cocoon. And that's when the moth larva hatches out and eats the caterpillar from the inside out. That's a natural control. I mean, that's part of the North American wasp group, They're not social. They are solitary wasp. And they fly at night. Actually fly at night. Yeah, they're pretty cool. And then birds and squirrels and bats, when they're flying around at night, bats will catch them. One of the birds that's famous for big moths is the whippoorwill. The whippoorwill, we think it's rare now because the moths have become rare. The moths are rare because of Compsognathura, and the Compsognathura is here because of the gypsy moth. And so we have this chain all the way up to the loss of the whippoorwill bird. But in the past, the whippoorwill would sit on the road or on a trail or on a rock in the woods and wait for a big moth to come by. And then you only needed a few of those and you would fill your tummy, They were sit-and-wait predators.
If you have to comparing this butterfly with the monarch butterflies, they're comparing something similar?
Well, I think, the monarch has this, it flies in the day, so people see it, and it's, pretty. It's real pretty. These moths, I think they're really beautiful, but they have more subtle colors. And of course, the monarch has this story, the migration to Mexico. I mean, it's amazing. It just has this sort of valiant, behavior of long-distance migrant. And it connects us to Mexico, which is good. We should think about conservation, across our own borders. The caterpillars of the monarch are so cool looking, they're all striped. And they feed low. The plant is low, so kids can find them. So there's lots of great things about the monarch for a good introduction. These are a little trickier, but not much.